Welcome to a new series of Newswatch with me, Samira Ahmed. This week, allegations are made on an ITV documentary of sexual abuse by the late Jimmy Savile. But why didn't the BBC air its own Newsnight investigation into the subject a year ago? And has the corporation been keeping a bit too quiet about claims it must find deeply uncomfortable? Also on the programme, how do reporters sent to cover lengthy live events fill the airtime with inane questioning, according to some viewers? And how come an offensive swear word came to be broadcast on breakfast?
Very good, beautiful morning to you.
Yeah.
How are you?
First, back in the 1970s, Jimmy Savile was one of the best-known television personalities in Britain. And this week, his reputation is in tatters after a stream of allegations that he sexually abused teenage girls. The BBC's reputation is also under question, partly because some of the offences are said to have taken place on its premises, and partly because of the charge that it's been slow to report on the accusations. The BBC has said it's horrified by allegations that anything of this sort could have happened at the BBC, and added that it's working closely with the relevant police authorities. Well, this week's headline sprang from a documentary shown on ITV on Wednesday night, in which 5 women said they'd been sexually assaulted as teenagers by Savile. And it's emerged that the Newsnight programme had been pursuing its own investigation last year into the case against the presenter, but that report was dropped. Some Newswatch viewers detected a lack of enthusiasm on the part of the BBC for looking into the whole subject. Anthony Webb emailed us to say, instead of burying your collective heads in the sand, you should launch an investigation into these allegations for the poor children that suffered at his hands. While Claire Purnell added, your silence on the Jimmy Savile issue is very telling. You are starting to look complicit in this. Well, in a moment I'll be speaking to the BBC's Director of Editorial Policy and Standards, David Jordan. But first, let's hear from another Newswatch viewer who contacted us, Terry Berry. Thank you for coming in, Terry. Can you sum up your concern? I mean, did you feel the BBC was covering the story as fully as they should?
No, I felt that when it first hit the news on ITV at News at 10, it was the main headlines, whereas at the time, BBC had no news about it at all, which I felt very odd, which also made it very uncomfortable, and immediately one thought there was some form of cover-up because it was a big thing, although it wasn't presented as being a big thing. Hence me writing to the BBC and saying exactly that I thought that maybe there's some form of cover-up, maybe, because it was not broadcast.
What is your feeling about the fact that there was a Newsnight investigation being done a year ago and that it got dropped?
Yes, I find that very odd and strange, and I think that the BBC, it's such a long time ago now, but I think that they should have been the first to react to anything like that, to make their name clear, put themselves in the forefront of investigations, whatever they're going to do.
So you felt that because this was a BBC presenter the allegations were about, in a way the BBC's role was to have been at the forefront of pushing the investigation rather than reacting?
Indeed, yes.
What do you think of the BBC now, given the coverage that you've seen?
I think they're moving forward, and I think they're actually woken up to the fact that this is quite a serious matter, and all the people have come forward so far to date, you know, have something to say, and if there are allegations, the BBC must delve into that and go back and find out what they knew and to bring these things to prove or disprove.
Okay, well, thank you, Terry. Well, we have David Jordan here representing the BBC's perspective. You've done a lot of interviews on this issue, but the question remains that the BBC's attitude to the story looks suspicious, and you haven't really answered that.
Well, can I deal with what Terry said, which is that we were a bit slow to pick the story up? I mean, the ITV News at 10:30 led with the story. They don't tell us they're going to do that, so it's impossible for us to reflect that in our earlier news bulletins. So we're operating at a bit of a lag.
To be fair, it's the sense
after that, I think
the BBC was much slower than newspapers and other outlets to cover this story.
I think you'll find that the story has featured in every one of our television and radio news bulletins since then. In fact, I know that it has, and that it's usually been very near the top of the agenda.
But it's been a big story for ITV. Newsnight was, investigating Jimmy Savile a year ago, and the decision to drop that investigation now looks very, very odd.
Well, as I've explained elsewhere, and as indeed the editor of Newsnight has explained in a blog that he's written about the subject, what they were looking at was, in particular, the way in which the Surrey police had investigated Jimmy Savile in 2007, and indeed interviewed Jimmy Savile under caution in relation to that investigation.
But you look at ITV, they've got 3 million viewers for this programme. I mean, the story was about about Jimmy Savile, and Peter Rippon's blog also says that they were investigating Jimmy Savile.
Well, they were investigating the Surrey Police investigation into Jimmy Savile, and they discovered that the Surrey Police had done a perfectly decent investigation into Jimmy Savile, had made recommendations to the Crown Prosecution Service, and then subsequently it had been dropped because they felt there was a lack of evidence. Now, you know, we can argue about whether you or I...
No, well, we can argue about the fact that...
whether you or I would have taken a different decision from the editor of Newsnight.
You look at that ITV documentary and you think, what a story. And now everyone else is reporting it. I mean, if nothing else, it looks like the BBC wasn't very good at news gathering.
Well, if you had the benefit of hindsight, you might say that. But of course, the editor has to take a decision on the facts that he knows them at the time that he knows them. Neither you nor I were there at the time. We don't know what facts he had at his disposal. He made an honest decision. He came to a decision on the basis of the facts before him and decided that that wasn't the angle which he wanted Newsnight to pursue.
You said
well, I think it's very difficult to say that it was a mistake given that I wasn't there and you weren't there. Somebody else might have made a different decision. Clearly, Exposure, ITV's documentary, made a different decision, and I congratulate them on the programme.
Why doesn't Newsnight run it now? Because they had been filming interviews.
Well, Newsnight could run a story now, but given that the story's out there and everybody knows what it is, there's a limited point in doing that.
Well, the story's only just being uncovered, isn't it? New witnesses are coming forward every day, and the BBC is encouraging people to do so. Why doesn't Newsnight show the programme now and we can all make our own decisions?
I think the fundamentals of the story are now well established. We now know that a number of women were appallingly sexually abused by Jimmy Savile, sometimes in BBC premises, at times during the 1960s and 1970s.
There is a big concern about the damage to the BBC's reputation. That must be of concern to you.
Well, I think the major concern that we ought to have is not about the BBC's reputation, because there's no suggestion that the BBC was complicit in what Jimmy Savile was doing. Clearly his reputation has taken a huge hit, and the main concern we should have now, I think, is for the women who were abused in this way, and making sure that they have an opportunity to tell their stories, be believed, get it out in the open, and hopefully to put it finally behind them.
Thank you. Terry, are you satisfied that the BBC's done everything it can now?
I think it needs to actually look at a situation whereby, not about the women who allegedly been abused, but about the people who are working at the BBC, his colleagues and friends and other presenters and so forth, who, to me, going by what I saw, it was a bit blatant, and I'm sure other people must have seen things going on who never come forward. For whatever reason, maybe their job security, who knows, but it's been kept quiet, as it was pushed under the table.
So you want the BBC to be investigating actually within
it's not letting it to the police.
Staff.
It's not for the police to look at, it's for the staff to come forward and say, yes, there was something, I did see something, to corroborate the stories of these alleged women.
Thank you very much, Terry Berry, and thank you very much, David Jordan, for coming to speak to us about this. Do let us know your thoughts on that or any other aspect of BBC News, details of how to contact us at the end of the programme. But now for some of your other comments this week. Wednesday saw two highly distressing stories covered live and extensively on the news channel. In mid-Wales, Tim Wilcox was following the continued search for 5-year-old April Jones, while in Manchester, Ben Brown was reporting from the funeral of PC Nicola Hughes. Both journalists, normally based in London, were on air for much of the day.
Well, let's speak now to Anwyn Morris, who is a local resident here. Do you know April's family, and how are they now in this terrible time?
I haven't spoken to them. We're a small community, so everyone knows everyone in this town. I'm sure, my thoughts are with them.
Let's talk to somebody who met her and who knew her, Beryl Cowan, who's a street pastor who worked with Nicola Hughes in Staley Bridge. When you heard the news about her murder and that of Fiona Bone, what was your reaction to that?
We were very sad. The whole of the street pastors in Staley Bridge were very sad.
Well, viewer Ellie Chalmers thought those interviews did little more than fill in time between news conferences and services, and not in the most sensitive way. She emailed, "I couldn't believe it when he asked a local woman how April's family were bearing up. How does he think they are bearing up? I'm sure I wasn't the only person to shout at the TV at that moment." On to the slain police officers in Manchester. I've just heard a local community worker being asked how she reacted when she heard that PC Nicola Hughes had been killed. Really? I'd hazard a guess that she wasn't jumping for joy. These two stories demonstrate that this parachuting in of newsreaders to the local area adds no value to viewers. Well, coverage of the search for April Jones led to more viewer reaction this week. Bob Service objected to the start of Wednesday's News at 1.
The mother of a missing 5-year-old breaks down in tears as she appeals for the public to help find her daughter.
He wrote, "The mother of a missing 5-year-old breaks down in tears. Whatever is the point of such a silly statement? And why show the poor woman in her grief? This is purely sensational reporting, the sort of journalism we expect from ITV or the Red Tops." Meanwhile, Ellen McNulty had a different point later that day. "You should be absolutely ashamed of yourselves to start your news at 10 with the rail news when there is a 5-year-old girl missing. Get your priorities right about what this country is interested in." Finally, those watching Breakfast shortly before 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning got rather more than they bargained for. As an interview began with the conductor John Wilson, the voice of a reporter could be heard off camera swearing in terms which upset a number of viewers. Stephen Edwards asked, why was there someone using the F word in the background? It could be heard very clearly. While a viewer named Leanne also heard the offending phrase and emailed, "I do not think that is acceptable." Well, an on-air apology was made, and the BBC later said it was reviewing its procedures, blaming the incident on a radio microphone being inadvertently left on outside the studio. Please let us know what your reactions are to what you see and hear on BBC News. Expletives preferably deleted. And if you'd like to share your opinions or even appear on the programme, you can call us on 0370 010 6676 or email newswatch@bbc.co.uk. You can also find us on Twitter @NewsWatchBBC. But that's all from us for now. We'll be back to hear your thoughts on BBC News coverage again next week. Goodbye.